Welcome everyone to Talk with Sally. How is everyone doing today? Oh, give me 3 seconds to pull up. Can you tell I was running up the stairs? I know I have like 90 seconds till my music ends. Woo-wee. Oh, what a beautiful day. I love going out of town. It is so much work. Hi, Kari. Welcome, Julian. Welcome, Super B. Timber Traveler. Welcome, everyone. Okay, let me catch my breath. Oh. Well, so this is what happened. I'll tell you why I was scrambling. I don't wear jewelry. You notice that I don't wear earrings. I'm not a jewelry person. But when I go out of town, I do wear my ring and I couldn't find it. So I was looking through like all of my places where I would have put it. And I forgot last time we went out of town, I stuck it in my eyeglass case. I finally remembered. So I was like, oh, phew, because the whole time I would have been on stream tonight, I would have just been wondering where it was. And anyway. Whew. Okay, so let me pull up this real quick. So tonight, guys, we're going back to Operation Gladio. This time I do not have slides, only because there's not as many moving parts. So I don't feel like they will be necessary. In our previous chapters, there was so much information and so many people involved. At this point, I think those who've been watching since the beginning of this series know all the moving parts. So it shouldn't be that, yes, I hate hiding stuff from myself. So I think that a lot of the players are the same, so we should know who they are. If there's someone that we have a question about as we're going along, we'll hurry and look them up because it's really good. When I do my slides, what it does is two different things. Is it allows me to validate the information that's in the book. If I can find it either on DuckDuckGo, Brave, or Google, then I know the information is correct if it matches up. And so far, everything has been except for one person, and that person, his name was there, just couldn't find any pictures, which tells me he was probably pretty deep into it. Sorry, I'm trying to pin the show to the top here. There we go, all pinned up. Okay, so guys, okay, so what happens is the Operation Gladio Part 7 that is on Rumble. You guys have to know that I mislabeled that. That's actually Part 6. So I'm going to go through and re-upload it and relabel it to Part 6. However, I didn't want to delete it. So I'm going to create a thread and put all of them in order and label them. So yeah, it's different than the one that is on Twitter. This is actually the real Part 7. So they are in order. So that's makes me kind of a lot mad that I did that. Actually, I did add them to a thread. So all my Operation Gladio videos are in order on a thread. So, and I did correct it in the thread. And they are on there individually as well. Thank you for asking that. All right, so if you guys haven't listened, so we're listening to the actual audiobook. I will play the audiobook, and after each section, we will pause and we will talk about it. Maybe I'll add more to it. Maybe I won't. There is a lot of creators out there who will only answer your questions if you leave a super chat or donate money. I am someone who doesn't like to do that. I don't always have extra money, and I have an important question to ask. So if you're asking a question that is relevant to this topic, please ask away, and I will try to get to all of the questions. And if you have more information to add to this topic, do so as well. Hi, Hundo, welcome. That is my goal. My whole goal with this entire series and everything that I do, minus my fun nights, is to educate you guys and for us to understand and see that there is this whole entire secret government out there that works under the radar, that they created themselves. And okay, I wasn't going to go into a big overview of Operation Gladio, but let's do it anyway, because it would only take, I've got it to where I can summarize it in 5 minutes. So we always hear about a shadow government, or we hear about the deep state, right? Or we hear about the cabal, or we hear about globalists. And it gets really confusing. If you just start calling them Operation Gladio going forward, everybody will know what you're talking about. So deep state to me is the globalist on a global scale, or the cabal. So I call it for what it is. I like to call it Gladio. And how it all originated, and it started before the 1800s, probably around 1880s when it's first documented in writing. However, it went on long before then. These people, this group of people would work behind the scenes. They would manipulate elections. They would create terror attacks, and they would do different things on different countries. Because they wanted certain leaders in position of power. The whole entire goal, the entire time, has been a one world government. When we covered the fall of the cabal, Jenna Osbard went in really good detail of the history, going clear back to Jesus Christ's time. And she went all the way through the different wars. And well, actually, should cover those again, because that'd be interesting to go through that first couple sections where she covered the history of all this. But it went clear back then how they messed in the French Revolution. They messed with the wars in Russia. Everywhere they've had a hand in everything. However, they were not protected by any government because they were kind of like their own little shadowy entity that was kind of working behind the scenes. Well, we go to World War II, and the United States forms this thing called the OSS. It's exactly kind of the same thing as the CIA. But the OSS was supposed to end at the end of World War II. And there was a group of people. So they acted just like a spy agency, collecting information, covert operations, assassinations. Your speak keeps pausing here. So anyway, so I got distracted. I'm gonna try not to read chat for just a minute. So they didn't want this thing to end. They do covert operations. They will infiltrate themselves into different factions of groups. So take January 6th, for instance. You have this guy named Ray Epps. They say he's not FBI. They say he's not part of Homeland Security. They say he's not part of the CIA. And those all can be 100% true, right? What he could be part of is Operation Gladio. He could be a Gladio soldier working behind the scenes, manipulating people and trying to incite people either into violence or to manipulate people to come to different conclusions. So if you take that into example, that's kind of what they do. So let's backtrack. I got sidetracked by reading the chat. Let's get back onto my target here. So they don't want the OSS to end. So you have the Dulles brothers. One is big into banking, one is a lawyer. And they get into this covert part of the government, and they really liked how they are kind of behind the scenes and controlling things. The original donors of the OSS were the Mellon family and, take a guess, Rothschilds. They were the first donors of that. Well, so they were operating all this time beforehand without being on the books. So what they did is they created a way to be able to fund these covert operations and be able to be protected by the United States of America. If it is in the service or the protection of the United States, they do not have to get permission before doing a covert act. So how perfect is that? They have, and they don't even have to disclose all the information unless the president of the United States specifically asks for it. And I think that law changed in the 70s or 80s because they were doing a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. So anyway, so this group of people, in order to fund the OSS, let's make this really simple and easy. So you have the Dulles brothers. They recruit these elite families to donate and to kind of be part of this whole banking industry. So they recruit the mafia. So you have the Italian mob in the United States. They recruit them to sell drugs into Harlem and the Bronx initially. And you had the DEA and all these people involved in this transaction as well. So what did, well, so they got them to sell heroin into this place. Well, crap, they've got to be able to get the heroin. So during the World War II, during this, like the Vietnam War and stuff, they built relationships with the general of Thailand. So you have Thailand, Laos, and Burma is a golden triangle. And that's where poppy grows really well. So the CIA, what they would do is they would bring weapons by plane into Thailand, Burma, and Laos, which is the golden triangle. And in return for those weapons, so they were giving weapons to those guys and to South Korea, like all theyese people over there. There's applying both sides of the war, and this is how the industrial war complex started. So in return for those weapons, they would get heroin. They would then fly that heroin into Italy, and it would go to either Corsica or over to the islands there. Is it Sardinia? Now I'm mixing up my two islands. I think it's Sardinia. And they would cut the heroin, and then they would ship it down to Cuba. And then from Cuba, it would either go into Florida, or then it would be shipped up to New York in like crates of oranges. Like they'd make these plastic oranges and hide it in there. And that was a way for them to get the heroin there. So it was sold on the streets. They would get cash for it. And Sindona went through and he set up all of these banks throughout all of the United States, in Italy, in Switzerland, Mexico. So the money gets funneled through all these different banks. The end goal is to get it to the Vatican. Why the Vatican? Because the Vatican is the most secure bank, the most private bank. All records are destroyed. You can't subpoena them. You have to be Sardinia. Thank you. That's what I was thinking. You can't do anything to get into these banks. So they're super secure. And so they would bring the money to the Vatican, and the Vatican would then either say, hey, I'm going to fund this NGO, or I'm going to fund this group over here, or I'm going to transfer this stuff over here. So at the direction of the CIA, and I'm not saying they're part of the government sanctioned CIA, because this is all private. You have your regular CIA people that, have regular jobs that are out doing good. And then you have this little secret cabal of people. And it's called a secret shadow government. And almost all of them are part of this P2 Mason Lodge. And I can't spell out my words. I finally figured out why they all belong to some form of a Masonic lodge, because it gave all of these people, even if they weren't even atheists, or part of it. Marcinkus was an atheist, and he was part of this Mason lodge. It gave these people an excuse to meet in secret, in private, once a year, under the cover of talking about religion or whatever, right? So that's kind of how they did this. And in return, the Vatican would take 10% of the money, and then he would funnel it to all these different banks that Sindona had. And then through the whole process, they were doing all this stuff in Italy. It was starting to become communist. And so they developed this Operation Gladio, which means left behind soldier. They would create these soldiers called werewolves that during World War II, along with the people during World War II that worked for Hitler, would go into Russia, and they would, Skull and Bones is part of it, yes, but they would go into Russia, and they would go and they would do terror attacks, or they would kill people in the middle of the night. During the day, they are everyday citizens. You wouldn't even know who they were. And so what they call them is Gladio warriors, or left behind soldiers. Every single country has Gladio soldiers in them, every single one of them. And you can call them left behind soldiers or Gladio soldiers. And they are there. They're trained by the United States government. They're trained by NATO and all these different groups. They're highly trained. And when they are called upon to do something, they are to be ready and they are to follow through. Think of what happened in the concert hall in Russia. And did you guys know that concert hall, that's where Donald Trump held his Miss Universe pageants not too long ago? Was it 2 years ago? However long ago that he was doing that. That is one of the places where he was. It was kind of like symbolic. It was kind of sending a message. And I didn't know that till now. So all these little minor terror attacks that take place could very well be Gladio. I'm not saying they are, but it makes you question and wonder. So they did all this stuff and set up in Italy. At the same time, they would take the soldiers during Operation Paperclip that were doctors and scientists, all these evil people from Russia, and they would take them to the Vatican. He would give them a brand new identity. He would give them new names, new papers, everything. And then from there, they got shipped to South America and mostly into Argentina. And then from there, they would go into the United States and either to NASA or some kind of program somewhere in the United States. And people didn't know who they were because they had brand new names. Hence, a lot of those people, when they say that we won World War II, it always makes me wonder if we really did, if they helped all of these people high up. You had the Butcher of Lyon. They helped him get a new identity. He was responsible for hundreds of thousands of people being killed. And they brought him to Argentina, and he played a major role in getting the cocaine trade set up. So Asia was the heroin trade. Then you have Southeast Asia, which is the cocaine trade. And then they bring it into California and those type of places. And so that was one revenue of money. And so hence, that's how the cartel got their power. That's how the cartel has been able to go and do all the things they do, and they don't get in trouble. Because do you know how much dirt he probably has on so many people? Okay, so as a result of this whole entire drug problem, what they have done is they set up clinics, rehab clinics. And I just found out that RFK Jr. has a bunch of rehab clinics. And I don't know if that's just from his own experience. It could just be a coincidence. But so and they would actually give doctors at these facilities would actually get people hooked on drugs. Because like therapists and stuff, because if they referred them to these clinics, the doctors would get a kickback. Plus the clinics would make money by the people being addicted to drugs. It's very sick. So we left off on South America, and South America to me was really dark. Hi, LW. Hi, Dev. And I think the reason why for me it was really dark is I just couldn't believe, like, it was just like the cognitive dissonance when you realize, oh my gosh, there are so many things that are working behind the scenes that are such a lie. But today we're going to continue, and we're going to start getting into like Sindona. We're going to get into the 70s and the 80s, and it's going to be more in the United States and the things that are going on here. So we will pause as necessary, guys. If you have any questions, I will only pause after each section, and I'll try to star them if we need them. Yeah, so anyway, we covered the South America portion of it 2 weeks before. Well, they were already having protests. They had a January 8th, and we had a January 6th. Hi, Deb. Your manners are great. I welcome saying. I think I've said hi to everyone. And anyway, so Brazil had a January 8th. We had a January 6th. They've been protesting like our people protested, except for they're trying to take away, like put people in jail for tweets. They're trying to sanction Elon Musk. And we take for granted our freedom of speech, which they're trying to take away as well. They're going through a huge struggle. And it was really bizarre to learn of all this Gladio operations. Like they overthrew so many leaders by coups. Like every single coup that has happened in this world, you could almost track it back. I think almost every one is being able to be traced back to Operation Gladio and Gladio soldiers. They will call it a different name. Like in China, it was called the Color Revolution. It's actually Gladio operations. You had stuff in Haiti, overthrowing their government. That was Operation Gladio. And they work in like the guise of guerrilla soldiers or secret soldiers, and sometimes they will infiltrate the other side as well. They want to cause that fighting, and the whole goal is to instill people in government that are going to go along with their one world globalist plan. The goal is a one world government. It's been that way forever and ever. They've been every time they get derailed from their plan, they go behind the scenes, they meet, and they recalibrate the plan, and they redo it. So hopefully that gives everyone that asymmetric warfare. Yes. Hopefully that gives everyone who's just joining for the first time a sense of where we're at. There is so many more details. The whole entire series is on Rumble, and it is also on X. On X, I did create a thread. So it starts with 1. You can go through the order. Note that there's 2 7s because I wanted to get back on track. I skipped 6. I just skipped 6 altogether. So the last one, you can go by the date. You go in order of the date and you'll be just fine. And I will go through and re-edit those. It's those people too. Everyone always tells me it's 13 families, and I only know 5. So I'm going to have to go through, and I want to do some genealogy. I've done that before, done a tree and traced everyone back. Like I traced Jeffrey Epstein all the way back to, I think, 1850s. But then it's like parents of this, parents unknown, birthplace unknown. But there's connections to all those families. So when we're talking about Operation Gladio also, guys, remember that this is in coordination also with like MI6, Five Eyes, Mossad. So every country pretty much has a CIA. It's just giving a different name. Okay, now I'm rambling because I'm kind of excited to be here tonight. I'm excited to go over this again. We took a break. It was much needed. It was like, I have to take a break from the madness of the world for just a minute. Cover some more madness. All right, I'm going to do a test. I'm going to play for 10 seconds. I'm going to push pause and make sure the audio is good on your end before I continue.
Okay. Chapter 9. Il crack Sindona. Considering the importance and all-consuming nature of the work I was doing at the agency, considering the missionary zeal, sense of elitism, and marvelous camaraderie among my colleagues there, one can see how easy it would have been for me to drop out of the world and immerse myself exclusively in the cloak and dagger life. And some of my colleagues at the agency did just that, socially as well as...
All right. I don't know if all the presidents can be traced back to Charlemagne. That'd be interesting to go back and look through their genealogy. That would be very interesting. Okay, guys, how's the sound on your end? Does it need to be louder, quieter? Yes, guys, please share this while we're here. We're pushing pause and we're doing an audio check. Everybody, please go through. I think I forgot to put that at the beginning of the thing. We'll start over. Please hit the thumbs up. It does help me out on all platforms, even if you're on X and you're watching from there. If you just have it on pop out and you're not chatting, leave a comment below it or share it, reshare it, repost it. That's the only way that, because I am a small channel and I am growing, and I do feel like I'm really putting out good information. I'm trying really hard to be knowledgeable about the things that we're talking about. And that just really helps people know about it. And I appreciate you. You guys are awesome. Okay, audio is fine. We're continuing then. I started over because I realized that I was 30 seconds in when I started.
Okay. Chapter 9. Il crack Sindona. Considering the importance and all-consuming nature of the work I was doing at the agency, considering the missionary zeal, sense of elitism, and marvelous camaraderie among my colleagues there, one can see how easy it would have been for me to drop out of the world and immerse myself exclusively in the cloak and dagger life. And some of my colleagues at the agency did just that. Socially, as well as professionally, they cliqued together, forming a sealed fraternity. They ate at their own favorite restaurants. They partied almost only among themselves. Their families drifted to each other, so their defenses did not always have to be up. In this way, they increasingly separated themselves from the ordinary world and developed a rather skewed view of that world. Their own dedicated double life became the proper norm. and they looked down on the life of the rest of the citizenry. And out of this, an inbred, distorted, elitist view of intelligence that held it to be above the normal processes of society, with its own rationale and justification, beyond the restraints of the Constitution, which applied to everything and everyone else. Former CIA Director William Colby, 1978. Who in the U.S. chain of command was responsible for implementing and directing Gladio, Condor, and the strategy of tension? It's hard to believe that these massive operations were orchestrated by a cadre of CIA agents, elite White House personnel, and select congressional officials within a planning room in Langley, Virginia. The undertakings spanned decades and required an ongoing funding of fresh billions from the drug trade and other illicit sources. Moreover, mounting evidence shows that the agency often acted without any input from the executive or legislative branches of the government. After 1948, Congress and the White House remained in the dark about most developments within the agency, including Gladio operations. During the 1950s, the Eisenhower administration directed the CIA to undertake covert activities in Iran, 1953, Guatemala, 1954, and Indonesia, 1957. But even these missions were conducted without consultation with any congressional subcommittee on intelligence. Congress was briefed in advance of the 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion and several clandestine missions in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. But no evidence has surfaced that either Congress or the White House sanctioned the establishment of Castle Bank and Trust, the Bank of Credit and Commercial International, BCCI, or the Nugan Hand Bank, all of which were solely owned and controlled by the CIA for money laundering purposes. In the wake of Watergate and revelations about the CIA's involvement in the toppling of the government of Salvador Allende in Chile, Congress passed the Foreign Assistance Hughes-Ryan Act in 1974, which stipulated that the president must be personally informed of all covert operations and must endorse a finding that such operations are necessary for national security. In the wake of Watergate and revelation,
I'm pushing pause and going back 30 seconds. I want to know the year this passed.
And several clandestine missions in Southeast Asia during the Vietnam War. But no evidence has surfaced that either Congress or the White House sanctioned the establishment of Castle Bank and Trust, the Bank of Credit and Commercial International, BCCI, or the Nugan Hand Bank, all of which were solely owned and controlled by the CIA for money laundering purposes. In the wake of Watergate and revelations about the CIA's involvement in the toppling of the government of Salvador Allende in Chile, Congress passed the Foreign Assistance Hughes-Ryan Act in 1974, which stipulated that the president must be personally informed of all covert operations and must endorse a finding that such operations are necessary for national security. The Church Committee.
Okay, so before we go to the next section, so pretty much these elite people got so used to dining where they wanted, getting special privileges and whatnot, that they almost formed like this, almost like they were kings and queens, but yet not having their castles and that type of thing. So they're just so used to living in their own little secret world, and it was easier to associate with this within this small group that they started thinking of us little useless eaters as a nobody. Like we are beneath them. So the things they do, they don't feel bad about. Like when people die in a war, or they go and do some kind of a covert operation and innocent people are taken out, they don't bat an eye. You're just nothing to them, right? And so the Castle Bank and all these banks that were set up, the government had no clue that the CIA had purchased these things. So then that's why they passed a law making it so that if it had to do with national security, they had to inform the president and only the president. And if he asked details, they were required to give it to them.
Despite this legislation, the CIA continued to engage in subversive undertakings, including the shipment of arms to the rebels in Angola and to the Kurds in northern Iraq. When news of such undertakings began to surface, the Senate established the Church Committee in 1974 to probe into the activities of the CIA. In its final report, the committee upheld the following: the overwhelming number of excesses continuing over a prolonged period of time were due in large measure to the fact that the system of checks and balances created in our Constitution to limit abuse of governmental power was seldom applied to the intelligence community. Guidance and regulation from outside the intelligence agencies, where it has been imposed at all, has been vague. Presidents and other senior executive officials, particularly the attorneys general, have virtually abdicated their constitutional responsibility to oversee and set standards for intelligence activity. Senior government officials generally gave the agencies broad general mandates or pressed for immediate results on pressing problems. In neither case did they provide guidance to prevent excesses, and their broad mandates and pressures themselves often resulted in excessive or improper intelligence activity. Congress has often declined to exercise meaningful oversight, and on occasion has passed laws or made statements which were taken by intelligence agencies as supporting overly broad investigations. On the other hand, the record reveals instances when intelligence agencies have concealed improper activities from their superiors in the executive branch and from the Congress, or have elected to disclose only the less questionable aspects of their activities. There has been, in short, a clear and sustained failure by those responsible to control the intelligence community and to ensure its accountability. There has been an equally clear and sustained failure by intelligence agencies to fully inform the proper authorities of their activities and to comply with directives from those authorities. Beyond the law. Ignoring the recommendation.
All right. Yes, Deb, that's 100%. Okay, I'm just making sure I haven't missed any chats here. Yes, Napoleon was fighting on both sides. They would be definitely fighting both sides of the French Revolution. That is 100% accurate. Because they learned one time they did fund the wrong side, and they lost a bunch of money, and they discovered that if they funded both sides of the war and charged a hefty interest, then they were going to be guaranteed. Oh, it was a joke. My bad. It was going to be guaranteed that they were going to make their money back. So pretty much, there's no checks and balance. No checks and balances were applied to these agents. They pretty much had a plan. They have their own agenda. It's pretty much their own secret shadow government. Yet they use the United States government as cover. So if something goes wrong, they'll use them to get out of jail free, right? There was no guidance given to prevent excesses of coups. Like, they could go out and buy an island. They could go buy people. They could buy planes, drugs, banks. They could do pretty much anything that they wanted. And the Castle Bank and Trust was one of the big ones that they set up. Intelligence officers also have made a habit of not disclosing all information, even when called into Congress. And a classic example of this is recently, I don't know if you guys have seen videos of this floating around. It's probably been about 3 weeks since I've seen them. But the coup that happened in Africa, there was pictures of these soldiers in Africa that took out this president down there, or their leader. Do they call him president? Whatever they call their leader there. They take him out, and someone in Congress is grilling him, and they're going, I should find this video for you guys. I bet I have it bookmarked somewhere. But they were grilling the CIA director, and they were asking him questions about why is this person, why does he have his picture in front of Langley? And then we see him over here during this coup operation. And they completely blatantly lied. They wouldn't answer. I don't know if they lied, but they would not answer the question. So they were obfuscating. They weren't telling the truth, and it was very obvious. So there's an example. Does anyone have any questions? Do they monitor everything they put out, Deb, or do they control everything they put out? Because definitely the media is part of all of this. And we discussed that, I think, in part 3 or 4, we go through all of that. Well, there are so many Handu that we've overthrown in Africa. Like, that's just one example. Yeah, I was pissed. Ford, I was really mad that Trump supported the aid to Ukraine as well. Like, that makes me very mad. And he disguised it in the fact that it's going to be a loan because there's lots of resources there. Well, the area that has all the resources is an area that is already occupied by Russia. That is almost guaranteed to throw us into World War III. It's really ridiculous.
Recommendations of the Church Committee and the stipulations of the Foreign Assistance Act, President Jimmy Carter, during the Iranian hostage crisis, encouraged the CIA not to inform Congress of its undertakings in Tehran. The agency needed no encouragement. From the time of its creation, it had opted not to inform any elected official of the full scale of its undertakings, including Gladio, let alone the source of its funding. Who then was directing the killings, the terror attacks, and the coups d'etats? Who was sanctioning the transactions with the mafias and the drug cartels? Who was creating the secret armies, the neo-fascist societies, and the bogus banks? The answer, in part, resides in the strange story of Michele Sindona's purchase of the Franklin National Bank in 1972. Sindona purchased the controlling interest in the bank from Lawrence Tisch. One of the world's richest men, Tisch was the acting chairman and chief executive officer of CBS. He also owned a chain of movie theaters, a cigarette manufacturing plant, a conglomerate of hotels, and a fleet of oil tankers. During World War II, Tisch served under William Wild Bill Donovan at the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, and never severed his ties to the intelligence community. He was a distinguished member of the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, a Washington think tank. The think tank. In 1961, the Christian Science Monitor described the...
Hello, Macklin Griffin. Welcome. All right. The contractors are all the same. They just change their name once in a while. Yeah, this is true. Lockheed is doing it right now. Yes, you as we've gone through this series, you can see the different names that they've done, or they will. So Sindona, one of his banks, was going bankrupt in Switzerland, and they gave him 2 days, I think 48 hours to close it, or they were going to bankrupt him. Hi, Mrs. Mack. So what he did is he took that same bank and he called it the Bank of Iran. So he just moved it to another country and named it something else. Same thing, same gimmick to steal money from people. So during the Iranian, there's very few presidents who've actually known the full scope of what has gone on during Operation Gladio. And those that do their best to make sure it's still kept a secret. So during the Iranian hostage crisis, Carter told the CIA not to inform them of what was going on. He's keep it very minimal. They don't need to know everything. They don't need to know the details, bare minimum. So who was sanctioning all these killings? It's not Congress. It's not the president. Well, it comes down to Sindona and Tisch. So Sindona buys the Franklin National Bank, which was owned by Tisch. Tisch used to serve under Dulles during the OSS time period. And Tisch, he owns CBS. He owns production companies in Hollywood at all kinds of different places. So you can see they have this little secret group of people that have their own little agenda. So you all tied into this, which we discussed at the very beginning, is Operation Mockingbird is tied into all of this. They went when they were doing the during the Golden Triangle and they were setting up their drug running. It was starting to come out that the CIA was involved in drug running, and they put a squash on it. So they went and bought newspapers, radio stations, TV stuff, and they paid them to spin a story and blame it on China. That's why right now I really have a hard time when everyone keeps saying that China is responsible for our fentanyl crisis. I don't think they are. I just learned last weekend, and I've got to do more research into this, and I trust the source of where it came from. Thailand just happens to be one of those islands that the Operation Gladio pretty much occupies and controls. So every time you're like, why are we sending money to Thailand? Of course, they have the cobalt for the conductors, sure, but why? You should see how many pharmaceutical labs are in Thailand. Why do we keep sending them money? There's a reason for it. And that's not a proven thing. That is a theory. But that would make a lot more sense than an actual being China. I'm not saying that China doesn't help in that. I don't have evidence of it. All I have is people in the press and in our government blaming China. They did the exact same thing, though, when they were bringing heroin and cocaine. They blamed China. And the newspapers and everyone went along with that.
The CFR as probably one of the most influential semi-public organizations in the field of foreign policy. It noted that the organization is composed of 1,400 of the most elite names in the world of government, labor, business, finance, communication, the foundations, and the academies, and has staffed almost every key position of every administration since that of FDR. 14 years later, Rear Admiral Chester Ward, a member of the CFR for 16 years, reported that a powerful clique within the organization sought the surrender of the sovereignty of the national independence of the United States to create a one-world government. Few critics of the CFR were more vocal than Senator Barry M. Goldwater, who wrote in his memoirs, "Their goal is to impose a benign stability on the quarreling family of nations through merger and consolidation. They see the elimination of national boundaries, the suppression of racial and ethnic loyalties as the most expeditious avenue to world peace. Their rationale rests exclusively on materialism." After noting that CFR members control both political parties, Goldwater continued, "When we change presidents, it is understood to mean that the voters are ordering a change in national policy. Since 1945, 3 different Republicans have occupied the White House for a period of 16 years. 4 Democrats have held this most powerful post for 17 years. With the exception of the first 7 years of the Eisenhower administration, there has been no appreciable change in foreign or domestic policy direction. When a new president comes on board, there is a great turnover in personnel, but no change in policy. Example, during the Nixon years, Henry Kissinger, CFR member and Nelson Rockefeller's protege, was in charge of foreign policy. When Jimmy Carter was elected, Kissinger was replaced by Zbigniew Brzezinski, CFR member and David Rockefeller's protege. Spook Haven. In 1972, when Sindona purchased controlling interest in Franklin National.
So that's not anything new that we don't already know. Most of us are, this is why I didn't do a ton of slides. I didn't do any slides for this chapter. This is all stuff people I guess my old age knows, is that even though a new president comes into power, they may clean house and bring others up to replace them. However, all these people who are appointed and not elected, they all work together in secret. it was just a thought came to me. Who was it? Oh, Trump did something to where these people couldn't double dip anymore. Because they would still have positions in the government and they would never retire, because what they were doing is they were getting with the government and then they were still feeding information to other intel groups, either whether it be big pharma or whether it be other things. And he put an end to that. Like, you couldn't do that or you'd be at big trouble. So this is kind of how the deep state or the shadow government has been able to function. Because even though you get rid of someone or a new president, you clear out the can't speak tonight. You clear out the cabinet members, and they're still part of the same little small group. Okay, I lost my train of thought there. My bad.
The CFR was a haven for spooks, spies, diplomats, military officials, and White House dignitaries. Among its members were Allen Dulles, CIA Director from 1953 to 1961. William F. Buckley, CIA agent and publisher of National Review. Master CIA operatives Robert R. Bowie, Donald Gregg, and Dean R. Hinton. Catherine Graham, CIA advisor and the publisher of The Washington Post. Edward Martin, former OSS Deputy Chief of Staff and U.S. Ambassador to Argentina from 1964 to 1968. Henry Sturgis Morgan, OSS officer and co-founder of Morgan Stanley. Jacob D. Beam, CIA agent and U.S. Ambassador to the USSR from 1969 to 1973. General Lyman Lemnitzer, Supreme Allied Commander of NATO from 1963 to 1969. Dean Acheson, U.S. Secretary of State from 1949 to 1953. Henry Kissinger, U.S. National Security Advisor from 1960.
Crap, I accidentally just removed that from the thinger. Hold on, let me re-add that. My bad. Here we go. It's back now.
Partner, who served as the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury from 1969 to 1971. Other members of the prestigious club at that time were Kingman Brewster Jr., President of Yale from 1963 to 1977. Arthur F. Burns, Chairman of the Federal Reserve from 1970 to 1978. Navy Admiral.
Okay, so right now, guys, I have to push pause. I'm not going to wait for this section. He's given out a bunch of names. I mean, you have the Dulles brothers and you have a bunch of other people. So you've got bankers. And I forgot to tell you guys about the institutions. A lot of times, well, not a lot of times, almost in every single country, they have an institution where these people are being trained. They're either being trained in anti-terrorism techniques or, gosh, the names are really obvious of what they are. In South America, they would train these people there. They'd actually would bring people who were going against the government, bring them there, horrible torture with electric prods. They would tie them to a table, strap the arms and legs in it, and they would take these, it's like a cattle prod. They would attach it to the genitals, the tongue, nipples. It was horrible, the things that they did. They did draw the line, because you have to remember that all through Operation Gladio, guys, and they haven't talked about too much in this chapter, is the Vatican, the bishops, the high-ranking officials in the Vatican are also involved in this stuff. So the priests were torturing other priests that were going against they called them communists. They weren't really communists. They just were they were sick of this globalization or this imperialism, where the United States would go into these countries and they would go in and they would overthrow a government and they would give them money. They'd be like, oh, they'd organize these people. You'd have Gladio soldiers that would go and cause chaos. They would use propaganda. They'd put out flyers, newspapers, radio announcements, TV, stuff. They put out this narrative and attack this certain group of people, kind of like with J6. Oh, they're insurrectionists. They are evil. They want to overthrow our government. Like, really, anyone who saw the real footage of that knows differently. Like, open your eyes. Like, just open your eyes to it. So that's like the type of propaganda that they've done in every country. So then you have this mob of people, like these leftists, going insane, like, you're insurrectionists, you're evil, and they smear these people, they debank them. So this is the same type of propaganda that they've been doing clear around the world. And my point of pausing was, for those who are just joining and they haven't watched all the other episodes, it goes into great detail. We've covered everything. But remember that institutions, why are we having issues right now with all of our colleges and all the students protesting? Where do you think the biggest population of these people are being brainwashed or being indoctrinated or being taught? Is at these higher learning institutions. And some may be recruited and have special classes, and some might just be going about their everyday life and have no clue about anything. So it's kind of crazy. And when we're doing this stuff, I want to bring it back to current day events, because the current day events that we need to be like, have our eyes open for and pay attention with all the sneaky things they're doing.
Admiral William J. Crowe. Thomas S. Gates, U.S. Secretary of Defense from 1959 to 1961. J. Peter Grace, CEO of W.R. Grace and Chairman of Radio Free Europe. Henry A. Grunwald, Managing Editor of Time magazine. Irving Kristol, founder of Encounter, a magazine funded by the CIA. William S. Paley, Chairman of CBS from 1946 to 1983. Robert McNamara, U.S. Secretary of Defense from 1961 to 1968, and President of the World Bank from 1968 to 1981. Nelson Rockefeller, Governor of New York from 1956 to 1973, and David Rockefeller, CEO of Chase Manhattan Bank and founder of the Trilateral Commission. The list even included the names of Lyndon Baines Johnson, the 36th President of the United States, and Hubert H. Humphrey, his Vice President from 1965 to 1969. The Problem Bank.
Okay, so you could just see the big names that keep flowing. Yeah, the Rothschilds are in there. So yes, don't forget the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds were the ones that funded it initially. The Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, they're all, and if it's a different name, there's some kind of a blood relation. Somewhere, somehow, they either a husband or an uncle or a second cousin. There's all kinds of relation. But the point is it's these big, huge, it's not just like a regular bank at your hometown bank. It's these private banks that you have to have lots of money in order to be able to go and bank there. If you don't have money, you're nothing. The sad thing, though, is these people stole a lot of money from these people, and they would take it, they would distribute it, and because they were betting on the market. They would bet it, they would short it, they would bet on it, hoping in returns. If they lost the market, they took the money from the people. If they won, they would take that money and give it to them as well.
Lawrence Tisch had been widely hailed as one of the most astute businessmen in American history. Throughout his long career, he rarely made a financial blunder. But in 1972, he acquired, through his Lowe's Corporation, 21.6% of Franklin National, which was based in Franklin Square on Long Island, New York. The acquisition was quaggy from the get-go. On March 6, 1972, federal bank examiners found the bank at the brink of insolvency, with its classified and criticized loans at $211.1 million. This figure represented 11.6% of Franklin's total loans and 91.2% of its capital. Moreover, the purchase of the stock placed Tisch in a compromising position. Being the major shareholder and a member of the board of directors of both the holding company and the bank, he had improper control of Franklin's assets and activities. This rebuttable presumption triggered a Federal Reserve investigation that might have resulted in criminal charges and a stiff prison sentence. As soon as the investigation got underway, Sindona appeared at Franklin on July 20th, 1972, with hat in hand, offering Tish $40 a share, $8 above the market value. Sindona was not a second-class mobster, but a world-renowned financier who would not buy a pig in a poke. Yet, at the time of the purchase, Franklin was posting a loss of $7.2 million and had been classified as a problem bank by the Office of the Currency. Why did Sindona suddenly show up with the offer? Why would Sindona take such a massive financial risk for an institution on the verge of collapse? And why was he willing to pay so much more than the bank shares were worth? Conspiracy theory. Some writers have speculated that the deal may...
Yes, these people, Dev and Kari, everyone in here, they're all part of. If you started out with heroin, it didn't stop with heroin. It went to cocaine, fentanyl, human trafficking. The group of people is absolutely evil and disgusting. And the more people that are aware of this, and the more people that share, you could blame it on me. Tell me this crazy lady on YouTube told you about it. They can go research it. Everything is there. So Franklin National Bank was where Sindona starts making some mistakes. The bank was about to go bankrupt, and Tish is the one that owned it, and he was about to lose everything. And this was going to trigger a Federal Reserve investigation. And if you know this group of people, they do not want people looking into their books at all. They don't want people looking in their books. So Sindona offered $40 a share, and it was $8 more than the going rate. This bank, like, why would Sindona want to do this, right? Why would he want to do that? Let's find out with this conspiracy theory.
May have been triggered by the animosity between Arthur Roth, who served as the CEO of Franklin National from 1946 to 1968, and David Rockefeller, the CEO of Chase Manhattan Bank, and New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller. Roth testified that he...
Okay, when we first started watching this book, I would pause after every section because there was so much information that we need to. I think a lot of us have a good grasp on everything. So I'm going to pause when it's relevant. Pay attention to these names. So Nelson Rothschild, did he say David or Nelson? Dang it, now I just lost it. My brain's going too fast tonight, guys. I'm rewinding 30 seconds. Hold on.
So much more than the bank shares were worth. Conspiracy theory. Some writers have speculated that the deal may have been triggered by the animosity between Arthur Roth, who served as the CEO of Franklin National from 1946 to 1968, and David Rockefeller, the CEO of Chase.
I forgot that the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds were having a kind of a spat during this time period.
Chase Manhattan Bank, and New York Governor Nelson Rockefeller.
And Nelson Rockefeller, he was the New York National Bank of, it was a Bank of America or National Bank. Anyway, he has this big bank in New York, and he was a big reason for a lot of the unrest in Haiti during this time. They overthrew their government. He brought his bank down to Haiti, and then they started going into Haiti and taking all of their resources, and they would have the people who lived there pretty much work for like slave labor, like $1 a day, like really cheap labor. That's another thing they do. They overthrow these governments. They go in and they'll set up banks, and they'll go in and take all their resources, and they don't have to pay anyone very much money at all. They go in there and they use these people. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Mack.
Testified that he ran into trouble with the Rockefeller brothers when he sought to establish a branch office of Franklin National in New York City. He said, "Starting in 1958, I came into direct personal conflict not only with David, but with his brother Nelson. And this went on over several years. It first came into the open during hearings on the new omnibus banking bill in Albany in February 1958. A good part of the legislature was present because we'd sent telegrams to each assemblyman and senator the night before, saying that if he wanted to learn the answer to the bank controversy, to come to the legislative chamber the following day. Arthur T. Roth compiled a huge dossier on the shady dealings of the Rockefellers and presented it to reporters when Governor Nelson Rockefeller arrived in California to campaign for the presidency. The wrath of the Rockefellers, according to this scenario, knew no bounds, and they set out to concoct a plan involving Tisch and Sindona that would result in the destruction of Franklin National.
I wonder if, guys, because so it was during from 69 to like 85 is when they were bringing cocaine. They were getting all the cocaine stuff set up in California. I didn't realize, is that the same Rockefeller that was the banker? I hate that I mix up Rockefeller and Rothschild. I'm going to have to look that one up. I wonder if he was, because if he was the banker that was in New York and they were bringing all the drugs and the heroin into New York, and then he goes and runs for governor in California, it would make sense that they would then start bringing cocaine up into California because they would have a cover. They would have the governor in their pocket.
The shadow game. Sindona purchased the Long Island Bank through Fasco AG, his holding company. He was represented by the New York law firm of Mudge, Rose, Guthrie, and Alexander, in which President Richard Nixon and Attorney General John Mitchell had been partners. Sindona informed the Securities and Exchange Commission that he had raised the $40 million for the deal by selling his shares in La Centrale, Credito Varasino, Pachetti, and Zitropo, major industrial and financial concerns, to Roberto Calvi, chairman of Banco Ambrosiano. Tisch got his money. The Securities and Exchange Commission seemed satisfied, and the comptroller of the currency asked no questions. But nowhere can it be verified that Sindona received the $40 million from Calvi and Banco Ambrosiano, and nowhere can investigators find proof that Fasco transferred the money from any of its accounts. As soon as the purchase was made, David M. Kennedy, Sindona's old...
So same family, not the same person. They also funded Cocaine Cowboys in Florida. Why have I not heard of Cocaine Cowboys? I'm going to have to look into that one.
Old partner took a place on the board of Fasco AG and assumed responsibility for voting the shares at the annual board meeting of Franklin National. Kennedy, at that time, had left his position as President Nixon's Secretary of the Treasury to become the U.S. ambassador to NATO. One of the highest-ranking federal officials was a prince.
Anytime you got NATO. So, see, watch for the revolving doors, too. How they're going to go from this position, go into NATO, or from NATO into this high-ranking position, whether it be the CIA or the OSS. Not the OSS. They don't exist anymore. From the OSS.
Principal player in the new shadow game. Bagging the broadcaster. When the deal was announced, Jack Bigan, a journalist for ABC in Italy, aired a report stating that concrete evidence had been established to show that Michele Sindona was involved in the heroin trade with American and Sicilian mafia families. This report should have raised enough suspicions for the U.S. regulatory agencies to disallow the transaction. But the purchase was approved without questions from any regulator. Several months after the broadcast, Bigan was contacted by Angelo Sorino, a Palermo police detective, who told him that he possessed documents concerning Sindona's ties not only to the mafia, but also the CIA. Bigan arranged to meet Sorino on July 22, 1973. On the day of the meeting, Bigan was kidnapped from his office by two thugs. He appeared 2 months later in a clinic in Rome. Exhausted and frightened, Bigan told the police that he had been forced to fly to the United States and had been transported to several cities. including St. Louis, New Orleans, and Las Vegas, where he was grilled about the source of his story. Begun said that he had pledged never to seek further information about Sindona or to follow up the story in any way. This was a pledge the journalist said that he intended to keep. Thinking that Begun's story was fishy, an Italian magistrate charged him for simulating a crime and ordered a full-scale investigation. The authorities ultimately gathered enough evidence to support Begun's story. Unfortunately, they were unable to question Angelo Sorino. The detective had been shot to death, mafia-style, on a street in Palermo in January 1974. Unletter unanswered. The only questions came from Arthur Roth. In an open letter...
So moral of the story there, if you're going to rat these guys out in any kind of form of a newspaper or an article, either you go missing or you keep your mouth shut, or you go missing for a while, you're tortured, threatened, and then you return and you keep your mouth shut. And then the people who are involved are no longer around to tell the tale. Is it crazy that our government works like this? That this is allowed to happen? I guess I always thought that the CIA and the FBI, they do these things and they have to because they're protecting us. They're keeping us as citizens so safe. They're looking out for me. When you find out that they are doing these things because they love power and they want a one world government, and your mama goes missing, or they do it because they want this one world government and you're stepping out of line, or you're not allowing them to come into your country, and they'll give you a couple $1 million. They're going to take all your resources. They're going to impoverish your people. They're going to make them miserable. But hey, you got some money, right? And if you say no to that, you're going to be replaced. And if you don't go quietly and get replaced easily, they're going to create a coup where either you are in exile or you're taken out completely with your family and your family's family. I think that this is the part of the story that had me so disheartened or cognitive dissonance, is that this part of the story was like, you can't be human. Like when they were saying they have their own little clique, their only clique, and you're either in this group or you're not. And if you're outside of this group, this is why they can do things to people and they don't care, because you don't matter. It's all about the end goal or them in the meantime. That's what I had a hard time with. And these are just examples. These are just stories. This, by the way, guys, this information that this writer has put into this book, and this is why I really, really like him. This is I came across this book to be my first book on this topic by accident, because I was just searching for Operation Gladio and I was just searching for an author, and I happened to stumble upon him. And people, like, there's another, her name is Colonel Townsend. I always forget her last name. Colonel Towner. I always want to say Townsend. I'll put a link in there. But she, after I'd already been covering it, I found out she was covering it, and she recommends this book as well. And she's an ex-colonel, and she had no clue about these operations. She had zero clue. She was high up. She was a colonel. She was high up. Thank you. Towner Watkins. Colonel Towner / Watkins. She does have a Rebel channel called the Colonel's Corner, and she does good stuff. She doesn't do like I do, where I listen to an audiobook. Like she's been in the military, so she has more of a knowledge that she can give from being to these countries. Like, she's been to these countries, and she later on, she's found out about these different operations and these different people involved. And when she was visiting these countries, she had zero clue. And it makes her, you can see her anger when she tells these stories. And I love her passion about it. And her goal, like mine, is to get the information out, because the more people know about this, the less duped you are. You don't fall for all their BS. Oh, hi, Will Call Magic. Welcome. All right, let's continue on. I don't even know where my end goal, my whole point of that was, but this is the stuff that made me sad. I think it's like I've always grown up believing in our medical institution. I've grown up believing that our government, they keep us safe. The CIA keeps us safe. They only do these bad things to keep us safe, right? But the extent they have done these things.
Letter dated July 18th, 1972, which he sent to the regulatory agencies and national newspapers, including the New York Times. Roth, who remained a minority Franklin shareholder, wrote the following to Lawrence Tisch. The newspapers of July 13th, 1972, reported Lowe's Corporation, of which you are its chief executive officer, sale of 1 million shares of stock of Franklin New York Corporation for $40 million. The sale was to a company controlled by Michele Sindona of Milan, Italy. Your sale of this stock raises some serious questions for the stockholders and depositors of the Franklin National Bank. 1. Do you know enough about Michele Sindona to unconditionally recommend him as a person who will be good for the bank? 2. Will there be a full disclosure of his finances, his backers, and detailed biographies? 3. Why would he pay $40 a share for stock that is currently selling for $32, having run up from $28 per share apparently as a result of rumors of this sale? 4. What are his intentions regarding additional purchases, and what role will he play in the operation of the bank? Tisch never responded to the letter. Neither did the regulatory agencies. Arthur F. Burns, chairman of the Federal Reserve, opted to turn a blind eye to the transaction, as did Peter G. Peterson, the Secretary of Commerce, and CIA directors Richard Helms and James Schlesinger. All four men, along with Tisch and David Kennedy, were prominent members of the Council on Foreign Relations. The Trilateral Commission.
For those of you who are just getting here, all of my other episodes have slides. So when I'm talking about things, you can go through and see it. If you knew how many banks that Sindona owned, along with the Vatican, like he helped the Vatican set up all their whole network of banks all along the globe. It is so far reaching that it is so incredibly insane. So him going and buying a bank and people vouching for him and people lying for him is it's like nothing. Like that doesn't surprise me one single bit.
If the situation was being manipulated by the CFR, the puppeteers most probably were the elite group within the organization who formed the Trilateral Commission in 1973. David Rockefeller became the chairman of the new commission, which openly sought to create a new world order controlled by multinational corporations and banks. During Operation Condor, Rockefeller traveled throughout South America, telling the newly installed dictators how to run their governments. The effects of his visits south of the border were crystallized in Chile, where in 1976, the military regime under General Augusto.
Okay, so there's an example, guys, of Rockefeller going into South America and telling their government what they will and will not do. After our government was done, after the people were done with that country, the citizens, it was supposed to be a democracy, right? Private ownership. The civilians ended up with like 5% ownership. Their government ended up with 25% ownership, and the United States ended up with the rest of the percentage of owning like factories and land. So that you had car dealerships, you had factories, you had all kinds of things. And what they would do is they would use these factories. Think about it. If you have a factory from the United States and you're going to be going across state borders, and say you have a chicken farm in Argentina, and you've got to ship these chickens back to the United States. What do you think is going to be in those shipments along with those chickens, guys? Think about it. The drugs. It's just the way that they have. This is why people are angry. And when these angry people come to the United States and they unalive the first person and then they get let out of jail and unalive the next person and then the next person. This is why they despise us. And it's not just people think it's people in the Middle East who despise us, people in Japan or other countries. No, a lot of people despise our meddling in their countries. Me as well.
Pinochet ignored international condemnation and the congressional cutoff of American aid due to its terrorist activities, thanks to $927 million in loans from Chase Manhattan, Citibank, Morgan Guaranty Trust, and other U.S. banks. The Trilateral Commission, in effect, had made American bankers a higher authority than the elected representatives of the American people. The financial nightmare. In keeping with Gladio's game plan, Sindona's purchase of Franklin National created a financial nightmare. By April 1974, less than 2 years after the acquisition, the bank was in a tailspin, announcing a net operating income of 2 cents a share for the first quarter, compared to the previous year's 68 cents a share. But even this report had been falsified. The reality was that Franklin had suffered a $40 million loss and the bleeding still needed to be clamped. By August, the Federal Reserve, knowing that Franklin was on the brink of collapse, granted the ailing institution unlimited access to federal funds. One of the most bewildering questions in the sordid saga of Franklin National remains the rationale behind the Federal Reserve's decision to shell out hundreds of millions to the Sindona Bank. Surely the Fed officials knew that the bank could not survive. Warning notices about Franklin's terminal condition had been issued by Morgan Guaranty Trust and a host of other international financial institutions. But the money kept pouring into Franklin until the Long Island Bank finally collapsed on October 8, 1974. By that time, the Fed had shelled out $2 billion to Franklin without any hope of recovery. It was the largest bank failure in American history at that time, and the first since the Great Depression. The Fall Guys. In 1970.
So these banks were never designed to be successful. They create these banks to launder money through. And they're not designed to make a profit. They are there simply to make money, not for the people that put their money into it, simply for the people who are going to benefit from it. What is this? A third bank that's huge, that's about to go under Sindona's control. So now that, after all this talk of banks and all these people owning banks into 2023, remember the Silicon Valley Bank that collapsed? The same person that, was it Occupy Wall Street? Oh my gosh, I'm mixing up my stories here. It was the SVB Bank, but who was in charge of it? I'm trying to find the guy's name. Oh my gosh, I know he's a popular person. Anyway, during the last financial crisis, he was in charge of that one as well. And then they let him go out to Silicon Valley and they let him run this other bank. In 2023, it goes under as well. And they say it was because it was lack of diversification. But think about how these banks and these people operate. They're not designed to be successful whatsoever.
75, Peter Shattuck, the former executive vice chairman of the bank's international division, pled guilty to fraud. He was sentenced to 3 years imprisonment and fined $20,000. Following their 1979 trial in the Federal District Court of New York, Paul Luftig, the bank's former president and chief administrative officer, and J. Michael Carter, a former senior vice president, were convicted of falsifying financial records. They ended up serving a year at the Allenwood Federal Prison Camp in Pennsylvania. But no charges were raised against.
Thank you. Jamie Dimon. Okay. Yes. Jamie Dimon. And Whitney Webb talks about, I want to do her book. We might, after Operation Gladio, I think we're going to go through and do her book. I think there's like six books. She put a lot of time into it. It's called One Nation Under Blackmail. She doesn't put in the Gladio angle, but she does put in everything else. And I'm very curious to see how that all ties in. Knowing what we know now would be really fascinating. Yes, it was Jamie Dimon, and he's attached to Jeffrey Epstein and all these people. So if the rumors, the alleged rumors about Jeffrey Epstein being part, it's only 2 books. I thought there was 8 that she's done. Maybe that was just 8 total. I don't know. Yeah, cool. It'd be fun to do. So you have Squirrel. I got to stop reading chat. I'm done with my thought. Having a real ADD day. So if you believe that Epstein is tied with the CIA, like the alleged, and that he did what he did to himself. I hate being on YouTube sometimes. I'm used to speaking freely. I'm adjusting to reach more people, so I'm going to try to do better. 3? I don't know. 3? Oh, you're talking about the book still. Anyway, so Jamie Dimon, CIA, kind of banking, islands, airplanes, kind of, you start getting you thinking.
Against David M. Kennedy, who remained the pivotal player in the plot. Kennedy's complicity in the crime was not only evidenced by his position as a director of Fasco AG, but also his voting control over the controlling shares owned by Sindona. The scam probably could not have been undertaken without his cooperation. Kennedy was well connected to Arthur F. Burns, the chairman of the Federal Reserve. Both Kennedy and Burns were key appointees of the Nixon administration, and both were prominent members of the CFR and the Trilateral Commission. Kennedy was also closely tied to James E. Smith, the comptroller of the currency, who neglected to conduct the legally mandated inspections of Franklin after Sindona acquired it, and approved Franklin's overseas expansion even when the bank was in dire straits. For many years, Smith had served as Kennedy's Undersecretary of the Treasury. Banca Privata collapse. Throughout 1974, the crack within the Sindona overseas operations continued to widen into a cleft. Having raided the...
Okay, let's go over CFR real quick, because they keep using that word, and I want to make sure that people, sometimes I forget definitions. So CFR, the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 12, contains the codified federal laws and regulations that are in effect as of the date of the publication pertaining to banks, banking, credit unions, farm credit, mortgages, consumer financial protections, and other related financial matters. So it's kind of like the regulatory agency over these banks.
The assets of Banca Privata Finanziaria and Banca Unione, Italy's national union bank, which he purchased with the Vatican in 1970. Sindona merged the two firms into a new financial institution called Banca Privata. The two large holes now became a massive crater that even the most myopic bank examiner in Milan could not ignore. By July 1974, Sindona's new institution displayed a loss of 200 billion lire. Somehow, Sindona managed to convince the directors of Banca di Roma to sink $200 million into Banca Privata. The Sicilian obviously possessed a silver tongue, because even a second-rate accountant would have been aware that Sindona's financial empire was about to tumble. The ill-advised loan, no doubt, was due to his position in the Vatican and his powerful American associates. By September 1974, less than 3 months after its creation, Banca Privata went into compulsory liquidation with losses over $300 million, causing Banca di Roma to teeter on the brink of bankruptcy. The loss to Holy Mother Church, according to Swiss estimates, was in the range of $1 billion. But such estimates failed to take into account the massive amounts of drug money flowing into the Vatican's coffers from the drug trade. Nor did they realize that the massive disappearance of funds was necessary to further the strategy of tension and the cause of Gladio. After the collapse of Banca Privata and Franklin National, the sound of Sindona's falling financial institutions reverberated throughout Europe. In a matter of weeks, Bankhaus Wolf of Hamburg, Bankhaus Herstatt of Cologne, and Amiens Bank of Zurich lay in financial ruins. Untold billions fell through a massive crater that became known in the Italian press as Il Crack Sindona.
Il Crack
The
Sindona.
midnight call. Shortly after the stroke of midnight on October 4th, 1974, Licio Gelli made a call to Sindona, who was staying at a chalet in Switzerland.
Real quick, HIPAA was formed in 1996. You're talking about 1974. HIPAA was formed in August 21st, 1996. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, was passed August 21st, 1996, with the dual goals of making healthcare delivery more efficient and increasing the number of Americans with health insurance coverage. Why was HIPAA established? I think it's because a lot of the information started becoming more and more electronic. We're totally off topic, but that's okay. So number one rule is privacy. 2 is transactions and code set rule. So everything has a code and not necessarily a label. Security rules. 3 is security rule. 4, unique identifiers rule. That even doesn't even make any sense. An enforcement rule. That makes 0 sense. Their definition on there makes 0 sense. Yeah, if it was 1996, it would have been Clinton or it would have been a Bush. 100%. Okay, back to our book.
Switzerland, to inform him that the Italian government was preparing 2 warrants for his arrest. One for a false 1971 balance sheet, and the other for filing a fraudulent statement of bankruptcy. Leave Switzerland before they notify Interpol, Gelli said. Get out of there so they can't extradite you.
So it's the second bank in Switzerland. Remember this last bank, was it 140 billion? It was a lot. I'll have to pull it up, but it was a lot of money as well. They gave him 24 hours to close it down, or he was going to be bankrupt.
If you don't, our enemies will torture you. They may even kill you. It is very dangerous, Michele. Things have changed. Things indeed had changed. Throughout Europe, prominent bankers had lost a fortune thanks to Sindona's financial shenanigans, and were now demanding the arrest of the Pope's banker. Sindona heeded Gelli's advice. He packed his bags and headed back to New York, where he could remain under the protection of the Mafia and the CIA within his luxurious suite in the discreetly elegant Hotel Pierre on Fifth Avenue. The good life. Life was good in the Big Apple. Sindona's daughter, son-in-law, and 2 granddaughters moved in with him. Every night they dined at the Café Pierre on the ground floor of the Hotel Pierre, where chefs prepared special dishes for the honored guest. Sindona became the financial consultant for Johnny Gambino's G&G, Gambino and Genovese Concrete Company. He also became a lecturer in economics at many leading American universities. At the University of Pennsylvania, Sindona waved the American flag and spoke as a democratic idealist. He began his address by saying, "The aim, perhaps an ambitious one, of this brief talk is to contribute to restoring the faith of the United States in its economic, financial, and monetary sectors, and to remind it that the free world needs America." At Columbia University, several days after he was sentenced in absentia by a Milan court to 3.5 years in prison for embezzlement, Sindona upheld the importance of high morals and fiscal accountability by saying, "When payments are made with the intent of evading the law in order to obtain unfair benefits, a public reaction is clearly called for. Both the corrupted and the corrupter should be punished." St. Peter's denial. Sindona may have been an honored guest at Ivy League institutions and private social clubs in Little Italy, but the bronze doors to the Holy See were closed to him. As Italian investigators uncovered the Vatican's ties to Banca Privata, Pope Paul VI became an object of scorn and derision. Stories appeared in the press claiming the Holy Father had lost up to $1 billion because of his clandestine deals with Sindona. On the left of the theological spectrum, the Jesuits attacked the Pope for his interference in Italian politics and the placement of the Church's future in the hands of the devil. On the right, Tridentan conservatives, including French Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre, demanded Paul VI's abdication. The Traditionalist, a Catholic weekly newspaper, after publishing a detailed account of the Sindona affair in February 1975, called the Pope a traitor to the Church. Archbishop Marcinkus was forced to submit to the indignity of intensive questioning by Italian officials about his transactions with Sindona on a personal basis and as a representative of the Vatican.
So just so you guys remember, Marcinkus was from Chicago originally. Sindona intentionally got him to be the Vatican's bodyguard. He pretty much was his protector. So he was very strategically placed. And what Marcinkus would do, what he allowed was for anyone in Sindona's circle or anyone that was running these covert operations had a direct line always at any time to the Pope. And that goes along with my theory that I always say that when JFK, I repeat this all the time, it's probably dumb, but when JFK, when he was going through the whole Cold War, and he had cut off the FBI, the CIA, and cut off all communications with anybody but his brother, and he had a direct line to not Gorbachev, that's Germany. He had a direct line to Russia. He had a direct line, and he would only talk directly to Russia. He didn't want anybody translating messages or anything. So the Pope had set up a priest to be his translator. And so if you know the connection with the Vatican and all of the CIA having these bishops and popes and priests in high positions at the Vatican that are all part of this whole Dewey, Project Dewey, Mason Lodge, then you would understand that. And that's how I think that they knew what he was up to. And that's why he's no longer here. Yeah, privacy, yes. Privacy Act, correct. You're fine. No, I'm on Mrs. Mack. I'm on a different level. My brain is going like a million directions. I think it's because I still have to pack to go out of town, and got everything done around the house, and scrambling for 20 minutes looking for my ring that I put in my eyeglass container. Apparently, I haven't used it since my last trip, which is since January, because I hate jewelry. Tell me which girls hate jewelry. Just me.
The Archbishop performed as expected. In April 1973, he had told U.S. investigators, "Michele and I are very good friends. We've known each other for many years." 2 years later, when questioned by the Italian magazine L'Espresso, Marcinkus said, "The truth is that I don't know Sindona. How can I have lost money because of him?" Sindona was shut off not only from Marcinkus and the Holy Father, but also from Roberto Calvi, the new Direttore Generale of Banco Ambrosiano in Milan, who refused to receive his telephone calls. What's more, Calvi and Marcinkus advanced Sindona's scheme of raiding the assets of the Milan bank by setting up a string of shell companies as unofficial subsidiaries of the Roman Catholic Church in Panama and the Bahamas.
Yep.
These companies began to receive massive loans from Banco Ambrosiano in Milan and Banco Ambrosiano Holding in Luxembourg. Such investment seemed secure since the Church was the rock against which the gates of hell could not prevail. As an added insult to their former mentor, Calvi and Marcinkus removed Sindona's name as a director of Cisalpine, the Nassau financial front, which now became known as Banco Ambrosiano Overseas. The Purple Funk. Pope Paul VI fell into a
Okay, so for all of you guys who've not watched this from the beginning, Sindona is the one who taught these guys how to he taught these guys how to bank. He taught them how to set up shell companies. He taught them how to go from this bank to this bank to this bank, and then finally this bank, and then maybe you take it out and hide it in your backyard. I don't know. Pope Paul, if this is 70s, I'll look. I have a slide. I'll look it up for you. But he taught these people how to do all this stuff. But remember, Sindona was hiding money, gold bars. Remember from the Germans? Was that Sindona? They're paying him back. They're cutting him off. 100% cutting him off. Marcinkus is where he is because of Sindona. The Pope cutting him off. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm laughing because it's what he deserves. Maybe they have a backroom deal. They're going to tell us. I don't know.
A purple funk. His behavior became erratic. He spoke with his confidants about the possibility of resigning. Before he would agree to set aside his tiara, the Pope said that he would have to make amends for the financial loss he had caused Holy Mother Church. He wished to retain the right to name his successor, and he requested the abolition of the 400-year-old decree that prohibited popes from selling their sanctified positions as vicars of Christ to the highest.
Oh, this is the Pope. Okay. This is the Pope that was in power when Sindona. This is the Pope that did not like what they were doing. So they're going to allow him. I guarantee you that he has a choice. He can either retire and pick his replacement, or he can be taken out. This is the one of the few popes that did not like what they were doing. That most of the popes have gone along. There's been two. The one in 1963 who died in June of 1963, just before JFK died that same year. So there was him, and he supposedly died of cancer. Some say it was poisoning. I have no idea. And this is the other one that I know of for sure. Yeah, the chimney, the smoking chimneys. Yes, 100%. They would put up a smoke to notify when he was done and his replacement was done properly. 100% correct. Anyway, so this is the second Pope, and I forgot about him.
Highest bidders among the College of Cardinals. This return to the time-honored practice of simony would permit Paul VI to raise a fortune for the Church, the fortune he had lost thanks to his dealings with Sindona and the Mafia. The Holy Father complained of lack of sleep. He wandered through the corridors of the papal apartments in the Apostolic Palace in the wee small hours of the morning, often complaining to guards and attendants of an ominous presence within the Holy See. "The smoke of Satan has entered the church," he said. "It is all around the altar." Extradition hearing. On September 7th, 1976, the United States, acting on behalf of the Republic of Italy.
Nope. Okay. Let's back up. Guys. Let's back up. They went back in time. We're in a forward chapter. Hi, traveling fools. Okay. They went back in time, which is, I dislike it when they do this, because we went into Argentina, we went to South America, and I missed a date somewhere because I must have missed a date. But we went from 1969 all the way up until 1985. And now we're back to 1963. This is that same Pope. That had the purple funk. So we're back in 1963. I apologize.
Initiated an extradition proceeding against Sindona in the District Court for the Southern District of New York. Distinguished individuals appeared in court to plead on Sindona's behalf. Carmelo Spagnuolo, president of the Supreme Court in Rome, swore that the charges against Sindona were part of a communist plot to undermine.
Okay, let's back up again. Okay, I will admit when I'm wrong, guys. I'm not too proud to admit when I'm wrong. I just misread what I just read. So let me just read this paragraph, because when I have questions, I'll look them up while we're doing this. And I only read the first two lines, which sometimes I famously do that. I try to do better at it. So Pope Paul VI was head of the Catholic Church and sovereign of the Vatican City. I saw from June 21st, 1963. No, he died in 1978 until his death in August of 1978. This is why I was mistaken. So this guy, Pope Paul VI, is the one that replaced the Catholic. But he also, I don't think, was going along with everything that they were doing. How about we just listen for a minute? They'll probably tell us the answer. And I should just shut up.
Leading industrialists of Italy. He claimed that left-wing extremists within Italy's judiciary had concocted a plot and that Sindona, a great protector of the working class, would be killed as soon as he arrived on Italian soil. Few in the courtroom were aware that Spagnuolo was a leading member of P2. It was small wonder, therefore, that the testimony of the Italian judge was supported by Licio Gelli, who, in a signed affidavit to the court, said, "The communists' hatred of Michele Sindona is due to the fact that he is an anti-communist and that he has always been favorable to the free enterprise system in a democratic Italy." Although Judge Thomas P. Grisa held Sindona extraditable, the Sicilian Don prevailed with an appeal that claimed his case fell within the ambit of Article 6, Section 1 of the Treaty on Extradition between the United States of America and Italy, 26 U.S.T. 493 TIAS 8052, which bars extradition when the person whose surrender is sought is being proceeded against or had been tried and discharged or punished in the territory of the requested party for the offense for which his extradition is requested. By the time the appeal was granted, Sindona was facing similar charges of fraudulent bankruptcy in the United States, creating a situation in which extradition, according to his lawyers, would place him in double jeopardy. There will be blood. While Sindona remained free due to this bizarre interpretation of habeas corpus, the Italian government continued to press for his arrest. This pressure prompted the Pope's banker to initiate action against his adversaries, including Giorgio Ambrosoli, the Italian lawyer who served as the liquidator of Banca Privata Italiana. In 1979, Ambrosoli began to provide damning evidence about Sindona's role in the collapse of Franklin National to John Kenney, a prosecutor with the U.S. Department of Justice. The evidence included transcripts that proved Sindona had pilfered funds from his Italian banks to purchase the shares from Tisch. In addition, Ambrosoli obtained checks and documents from Giorgio Giuliano, deputy superintendent of the Palermo Police Department, which showed that Sindona was laundering heroin profits through the IOR and Amincor, his Swiss bank, for the Gambino Inzerillo Spatola crime syndicate. He also had secured information from Lieutenant Colonel Antonio Varisco, who was investigating P2 concerning Sindona's close relationship with Licio Gelli. On July 11, 1979, only hours after conferring with Kenney, Ambrosoli was shot and killed in Rome after parking his car in front of his apartment. 2 days later, Varisco and his chauffeur were killed by a hitman wielding a sawed-off shotgun. On July 21st, Giorgio Giuliano was shot dead while having a drink at the Lux Bar in Palermo. His replacement at the Palermo Police Department was Giuseppe Impalomeni, a member of P2. The Sicilian coup. While mafia assassins eliminated the problem of his Italian adversaries,
okay, we're going to have another Sicilian coup, guys. How many are we going to have? Yeah, these people are pious. They are not pious. This is why I always say, and my religion is not exempt from this, that every religion has corrupt people in them. Doesn't mean the religion itself is bad. It doesn't mean the teachings are bad. You always have to know the books and know when you go to do your worshiping or your studies at your particular church, that you know your book and not just from people telling you what to think. Because if you're lazy, you can be very easily manipulated.
Sindona continued to plan a coup that would mark the culmination of the years of lead. the annexation of Sicily from mainland Italy. This plan, initially approved by the Nixon administration in 1972, called for an armed invasion of the island by Gladio units and the installation of a right-wing government. It was drafted in response to the anti-American policies of Ugo La Malfa, Minister of the Italian Treasury, and the steady rise of support for the Italian Communist Party in the general elections. John McCaffrey, the Hambros representative in Italy and the chief of the European resistance movement for Europe during World War II, teamed up with Sindona and Graham Martin, the U.S. ambassador to Italy, to become one of the principal planners of the coup. The coup failed to take place during the Nixon years, according to McCaffrey, because of the lack of security for the Gladio units and the emergence of the Watergate upheaval. But plans for the coup were...
Sometimes I wonder if Nixon, I don't know, so don't quote me on this. Sometimes I wonder if Nixon wasn't as bad as everyone says that he was. And I sometimes wonder if he was, I think he knew a lot of this stuff because I've seen evidence of him knowing things. I wonder if it's kind of like a Trump situation where they were always trying to spy on him. Because if they had lack of security for their operations because of Nixon, to me, I don't know. It makes me wonder if he was against what the CIA was doing in other countries.
Were revived after Aldo Moro, Italy's prime minister, announced his intent to create a new Italian coalition government of communists, socialists, and Christian Democrats. The notion of such a coalition prompted Sindona to meet with Dr. Joseph Michele Crimi, the chief surgeon for the Palermo Police Department, a prominent P2 member, and a CIA operative, and Rear Admiral Max K. Morris, a prominent naval intelligence official. Admiral Morris advanced the notion of the coup with Admiral Stansfield Turner, the CIA director, and preliminary plans got underway. An American aircraft carrier was deployed off the coast of Sicily with a ship full of soldiers ready to provide military assistance. The ship allegedly was placed under the command of Count Edgardo Sogno, a World War II resistance hero with a long record of involvement in American-backed coup attempts. The Admiral's Letter. Sometime in June 1979, Michele Sindona, Johnny Gambino, and Rosario Spatola met in a room at the Conca d'Oro Motel in Staten Island. Sindona disclosed his plan to liberate Sicily from the mainland. He informed them that Dr. Michele Crimi had generals in the Italian army drawing up maps of the military bases that must be taken over. The U.S. military has authorized me to do this, he told them. They will not participate in the coup, but there will be a fleet off the coast of Sicily. After we have taken over, they will enter the island to help restore order and protect us from Italy. For proof of U.S. involvement, Sindona produced a letter from Admiral Morris. See? It is true, he told the American mobsters. We can do this. But I need 200 more men. More guns. If you help, I will grant all mafiosi amnesty for crimes committed before the coup. Rosario Spatola kissed Sindona's hand, a Sicilian gesture of respect. The plan was ingenious. The Gambino capos would cooperate. What greater catastrophe could the combined forces of Gladio, the Mafia, and the Vatican inflict upon Italy for its concessions to communism than the breakaway of one of its most important provinces as a separate state? Closing time. But it was too late for Sindona to realize his dream of an independent Sicily. In August 1976, Carlo Bordoni, his right-hand man, was arrested in Caracas at the request of the U.S. Justice Department for his role in the collapse of Franklin National. From his cell, Bordoni granted interviews to Italian journalists in which he spoke of the machinations of the Sindona Syndicate, including the ties to the Vatican and the CIA. In January 1977, Mario Barone, whom Sindona appointed to head Banca Privata, spoke of the list of 500 that Sindona kept in a safety deposit box. This list, according to Barone, contained the names of 500 politicians, industrialists, and mafiosi involved in Operation Gladio, and the smuggling of hot money out of Italy. The walls were closing in on Sindona. The federal officials left Bordoni in the filthy cell in Venezuela 3 years before extraditing him to the United States in June 1979. By this time, Bordoni was willing to spill his guts in court. The trial date for Sindona was set for September 10th. But St. Peter's banker was not terribly worried. He believed he would be protected by the U.S. intelligence officials he had served so long and so well. After all, his only crime was to make the world safe for democracy by opening the floodgates of black funds. Few men could have done more. On the morning of August 2nd, Sindona walked out of his luxurious suite in the Hotel Pierre and disappeared.
That was the end of the chapter. That's how long is the next chapter's 21 minutes. Let's see how long the one after that is. Oh, okay. I'm really tempted to do another chapter. This book, we've already got through all the meat and potatoes and all of the stuff. Now we're getting into how are these guys going to have to pay for anything? I wonder. What was I just going to say just a minute ago? Yeah. So before Carter, there was a long string of Republicans. Then they put in a Democrat, and then we have another long string of Republicans. And then we get a Democrat and another long string of Republicans. Very interesting. I honestly have never paid attention to the presidents and what they did in the past. After listening to Gladio and watching about Watergate and all that stuff, it just makes me really wonder when they either lift up a president a lot by history or they demean them by history. What is reality? In my eyes, FDR was just a great president. I was just taught how FDR, like Franklin D. Roosevelt, I just always remembered him. He was one of the big ones. So Lincoln, JFK, Andrew Jackson, Nixon, Trump were not liked by the evildoers. That makes complete sense. We know Lincoln was taken out. JFK was taken out. Wasn't there an attempt on Andrew Jackson, or am I misremembering that? Oh no, I'm going to have to find this space, Mrs. Mack. I'm going to find it, and there's a portion of that. I will only do it on Rumble. You'll have to subscribe to Rumble because I'll only do it on Rumble, and I will only do it on Twitter. But it goes into the whole Disney angle. It goes into all of that, and it's really cool. Yes, the alphabet agencies do what the alphabet agencies do. My whole focus, especially with this segment or this series that I'm doing, is specifically Operation Gladio. Reason being that if you understand Operation Gladio, you understand how everything works. You don't get fooled by things. It allows you to question things at a different level and have a bigger understanding. For me, that's what it's done for me. And if you know that their goal is a one world government, and you know how they're creating coup d'etats and they're infiltrating other countries, and they are taking their resources as if, they're in charge, right? They're in charge. They own this world. Why won't everyone just figure out that they own this world and just get on board with the program, right? This is why they want open borders, because it's a lot easier to smuggle things in and out of a country when the borders are open, when they can come and go as they please. And then when you understand with having a one world government, their true goal is 15-minute cities, transhumanism. And when I say transhumanism, I don't mean cyborgs with wires and crazy stuff coming out of your head. It's more like augmented reality, having virtual glasses, operating a robot across the world. And yes, a lot of it's population control goes hand in hand with the one world government. They think that the world, you need less people. You have to have less people in order to control them. And that's why they let people from other countries infiltrate your country, whether you're in Europe or you're anywhere, especially the United States, when they come into our country and they say, hey, if you join the army, guys, we will make you a U.S. citizen. Okay, so you have someone that comes from Venezuela or Africa or Syria or any of these other countries. They come here and they already kind of hate us to begin with, right? And they're going to be part of this army. They're going to train them. They're going to allow them to have weapons. They will have our same rights that we have, right? Then what happens when they say, hey, we want you to go to bumfuck Iowa and we want you to take out these people, right? They're not going to think twice because they haven't grown up in this society. They don't have our moral background. They don't know what it's like to be a citizen. We're not supposed to go after our own. We're supposed to protect each other and love each other and have communities. And we've gone away from community. We used to you'd go in Utah, it's a little different because we're still good night timber travel. We're about done anyway. Thank you. And I'm bringing my equipment with me, guys. So we'll see movies, what nights. I'm not going to do every night, but I'm going to do some stuff while we travel. But when people don't have our same, I was saying, in my state, our church is a lot about community. Someone gets sick, you have casseroles or food brought to you for 2 weeks straight. The elderly lady has hip surgery and she lives alone. People are going to be mowing her lawn, pulling her weeds. My neighbor, she had hip surgery. I pull her weeds. I trim her lawn. It's what we do. And my neighbors, my little circle, last year, my tree fell down on my house. And I knew I needed to trim this one branch because it's a big old willow tree. And I knew I needed to trim it. And every time a windstorm would come, I was just like, please just make it. Please just make it. And I knew I should have done it 2 months prior to it breaking because it was too much weight the way it grew up because it was growing out this way and the branch was growing straight up from it and it smashed right into my house. But the moral of the story is within 3 hours, and it was a big branch. Within 3 hours, the neighbors had saws, they had ropes. They came and they took this branch down, they cut it up, and they went and they stacked all the wood on the side of the house. Where, that's what community is supposed to be. We look out for each other. And there's going to come a time, I say this all the time, there's going to come a time where these liberal leftists are going to figure out and have an aha moment. I encourage you to allow them to do so and be like, haha, I told you so, you dumbass, right? When you already make a mistake, it already sucks. You're already probably beating yourself up. Allow them to change. Because if you don't allow them to change, then they won't. Thank you, Mrs. Mack. I'm so glad you guys are here. I was really nervous about streaming this stuff because this stuff is really interesting to me. Even my guy doesn't want to hear about it. He's like, because I'm in this cuckoo world, but it's not. To me, it's real. And to me, I think about this stuff because I'm all about, maybe it's because I played a lot of chess. I love playing chess, the actual board game. I love playing it. Love strategizing. I can play for hours. But it's always thinking ahead, thinking about the moves, thinking about the plays and how everything works together, right? I don't know, but to me, it's important. I think we all need to know this. People all need. I do wear my tinfoil hat proudly, and I used to not. I used to be ashamed of it because I'd have these thoughts. And I'm like, hey, it's even like with the transhumanism stuff. I'm like, that is just too crazy. There's no way. It doesn't make sense. But when you take it and don't make it, so they make it seem like it's this extreme thing. And it's not that extreme. It's more about mining your data. They're going away from teaching you intellect and more about emotional learning. Oh, it's okay. You want to be a kitty cat and you want to have a litter box at school, but that's okay. We can't judge you. Oh, you want to overeat and you want to be unhealthy and you want to be really big. Okay. Your feelings matter. Okay. Right. It's this. And so they're encouraging this emotional learning versus math, critical thinking, the big one. They're taking that away. And so when you think of transhumanism, it's trying to make a DEI. They want everybody to be the same emotional level. Because if you're the same, you are easily manipulatable and you will do what you're told. And transhumanism isn't about being a cyborg. It's about ways that computers are going to replace humans. And they're already doing it in California. They increase, and they have to, in order to accomplish this, they have to have a universal basic income. Watch Canada. They're going to do all this stuff in Canada first. I guarantee it. Because they're already there, unless their people can stop them. But they're starting there. They increase the minimum wage. Yeah, McDonald's can't afford to pay people $20 an hour, so they fire everyone, and now you can have your food made by a robot. You order with a robot, and you pay with a little swipey swipe, and your food's brought out by a robot. Yeah, I never had a paddle in my school. That's scary. But I was always afraid to get beat. So I think that's what made me a very timid child, a timid person, is I was always like watching and observing people and getting to know people before I'd ever open my mouth. And now it's like, whatever. Like me, hate me. I'm who I am. And I love you guys. And I want to be genuine all the time. I don't ever want to be this fake person. And I know that that's why I will always grow slow on this channel. I'm not going to say I'm going to grow slow. This is why, because I won't tear people down to do what I do. I want this to be a fun, happy place. Hang out with you fun people, because you guys are amazing. And there's a lot of knowledge out there. I have the time now in my life to share this knowledge with you guys. Yeah, everything is Canada's fault. I always thought that I would escape to Canada if the United States failed. Like that was my go-to place, even if though it was cold, right? That's the place I was going to go run to. And now I don't know where I'm going to go. There's nowhere. Everything is touched. Everything is touched by like this corruption. I was watching this. So there's a ex-CIA, supposedly an ex-CIA agent who has a channel on YouTube. And he's really big. And I don't think he's ex-CIA. If he is, he was not part of this other group. He was part of the official group. And thank you, Dev. But the things that he was saying, but he said by the year 2030, he has kids. By the year 2030, he's moving out of the United States. And I was like, why is he moving out of the United States? And he said it's because he has kids and he wants to raise them in a safe environment. And he's supposed ex-CIA. I don't know. I kind of think he's either a mouthpiece. I'm waiting. I sent it to another person that was in the government to watch and give me her assessment on him, because I was curious what her thoughts were, because he talks very highly about them. And he's like, oh, you got to follow. If you want to write a book, you just got to follow the protocols. If you want to be a whistleblower, you have to go up the chain of command and follow protocols. And if they say you can't do it, then you go to court. I'm like, really? I don't know. Fidel was able to take Cuba with 88 people. I've got my eye on Key West. Yeah. I don't know. That the whole Cuba story. My friend sent me her information on the whole Cuba angle. And I've got to get studied up. But I want to finish Operation Gladio up officially the rest of the way. I was wanting to make all the slides and make it all like exciting and fun. We're at a point where the slides are not as necessary as at the beginning. So talking about it and getting the information out there is important. We can always go back and cover it a second time because the information is that important. Okay, let me see what time it is, because so it's almost 11 o'clock. I don't think I have a ton to pack. Okay, so watch out for a notification on Twitter or in my locals channel, talkwithsally.locals.com, something like that. I should put a link up. Oh, by the way, everybody, let's go over, guys, if you like what I'm doing, you want to support me, you can always support me by always giving me a thumbs up, leaving comments. And if there's something, you can leave suggestions for me of things to do differently. I'm not set in my ways. I'm willing to change if I believe that it needs change. but your feedback is important. So leave feedback. So by hitting thumbs up, sharing off platform, even if you text it to someone or share it to Twitter or whatever, share the content. That's one way that you can help me. I am monetized on Rumble. So you always can leave Rumble rants on Rumble. And I think you can leave as little as $1. And you can also subscribe to Rumble for $5 a month. And you get your name highlighted with this cute little pink little highlighter. Or you can sub to my locals, which is $5 a month. And I have an ongoing chat in there. And eventually, someday, somehow, I'm going to figure out how to be in there more regular. I haven't figured it out yet. And it's not from lack of desire. It's lack of time and with yard time. Anyway. Or you guys can, I monetize on Twitter as well. So you can like my stuff on Twitter. You can share my tweets on Twitter. Or X, sorry, on X. You can share my content. You can leave messages and likes and all that fun stuff over there. And there you go. Okay, let's put up my link one more time. So my Cash App, guys, I'm not begging for money. This is if you have extra and you would like to donate, you can. Because I always like, oh, people are always grifting. And I want you to do it because you want to and because you have it, not because I'm begging for it. But I'm going to give you the links so that you can if you decide you want to. So why didn't I push the banner link? Hold on. Can you tell I can't talk and multitask at night? Okay, so there's Venmo and Cash App. Let me go back to the comments and paste it one more time. You should be able to click on each link separately. Or guys, also, if you forget these links and you're like, oh, that's just a hassle, you can always go to my X page. It is Talk with Sally as well. And at the top of your profile, you have follow, and then you have your DM box, and next to it, you have another little box that's kind of got a little design on it. That's your links. So I have my Venmo, my Cash App are there. So you can go there. If you Venmo me, I will never, ever, ever, if your real name comes across, I don't farm your names. I will you can say, hey, this is Mrs. Mac from YouTube, right? I will never, ever, ever disclose your personal information because I'm not that person. I've been doxxed or people have tried to dox me. It doesn't feel good. I will never do that to anybody, even if you made me mad. Yeah, I had PayPal. I can't do PayPal. They did changes to my account without notification. So that's okay if you can't donate. It's okay. But no, PayPal, I did have it. I had it all set up. It was working good. And they, without even notifying, someone just said, hey, what's going on with your PayPal? And so I went and looked, and then they didn't send me no email or anything. So I had to delete it. It was really bizarre. They changed my profile picture. They changed it from a personal to business account, which is fine. If they wanted me to change it to business, I could have, but they didn't notify me or tell me to do it. They just did it. And they changed the name on my account from my screen name, because everything is set up with Talk with Sally, to a different name. And it was like, okay, we're done. So thank you. I wish I would. But yeah, that's why and PayPal, if you say the wrong things, Mrs. Mac, I know that Venmo and PayPal are owned by the same people, but if you say the wrong things, they still have the little thing in there, that the provision in there that they can fine you $1,300. On what information were they acting? I have no idea. No idea why it happened. I don't know what you're talking about. And I'm not going to go into it on here, just so you know. Yeah, it happened. Remember, it happened on Twitch way back when I stopped using it on Twitch is when I stopped using it. Anyway, guys, what my whole point of all saying that is I'm hoping I have to still do my toenails tonight before vacation because that's something I do. And I do the gel thing. So it takes a minute. If I get done packing at a decent hour, I'm going to throw up a movie because I might as well do a movie and do my toenails at the same time. And no, I won't be showing you my feet. Okay. I'm just going to be watching a movie, hanging out while I do it, and I'll multitask but if it happens, I will put up a link on my locals and on my Twitter feed. So that was my whole point. And then, yes. I think that's everything. Okay, now I rambled forever. Now I'm losing my train of thought. You'll send it by mule, Docky. You're so thoughtful. Chihuahua Express. That's awesome. My daughter, her car was in the shop. So my kids, once they get to a certain age, they have to pay for their own stuff. But anyway, she had to pay to get her car fixed, and she had got right over to my house, and she was visiting with me, and she's like, "Yeah, I had to walk up to Grandma's house using my Nike Express." And I'm like, "Oh, is your car broke?" She's like, "Yeah, my car's in the shop." So my Nike Express sneakers, I thought it was funny. And Grandma lives like literally around the corner. It was hysterical. Well, out where we live, the blocks are like mile blocks. So it was probably like 400 meters is all. Not that far. It was kind of funny though. Oregano, Oregon Trail or Oregano Trail. Oh, all right, guys. I'll leave it a notification. There's no guarantees. I'm going to try to pack quick because I hate packing, but hopefully I can do it quickly. I'm ending in 3, 2, 1.